Welcome, Simone Milasas on the Me&my Health Up podcast show. How are you today?
I am wonderful, Anthony. And yourself?
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for coming on, and look forward to hearing what you have to share. Essentially, I've been in the background doing my research and looking up all about access consciousness. But before we get into the topic, I'd really want you to share how you've arrived at what you're doing today.
It's an interesting question because you could go on forever with this, and there's sometimes those really small things in life lead you to something. So the big answer is my choices have made me arrive at where I am today, and the willingness to choose something different. Because I know for a lot of my life, when from even at high school, it's like people would talk about, going to college, getting married, having kids. And I was like, I want to see the world. Like that was my choice. And I get the sense, or I feel like I almost went against what so many people were choosing my whole entire life, not to prove anything, not to, try and fight against anyone. It was just didn't match. You know how like when you try and fit in and you don't fit, you keep trying to fit in and you're like, this just isn't working. It's like hitting my head against a brick wall. So as soon as I left high school, I went overseas. I told everyone I was going for 6 months and ended up staying for 3 years, and I traveled the world. I worked in many different places. I went around the planet discovering it. That was always a very important thing to me. I really wanted to see the entirety of the world. I grew up in Sydney where you are, and I wasn't happy just growing up in Sydney. Like, I love Sydney. I think it's such a beautiful city, and I had such a great time there. But I was like, it's not big enough. Like, I need to see something more. I need to, meet more people and see how other cultures are. And the planet was always something that was so intriguing to me. Nature, like all around the world, the diversity of it. So I kept doing that. And I'm going to say I kept following the energy. And for me, something from a really young age is I wanted to see how I could wake people up, and I guess the concept I had was like, am I allowed to just grab people by the shoulders and shake them and say, don't you get it? There's got to be something different. Like, the trauma and drama, or the, oh my God, my boyfriend left me, my girlfriend this, or anything like that. There's got to be something else besides all of that. Yes, you can enjoy, everything that life has to offer, but let's go bigger. So for me, that was something that drove me with everything that I've chosen. And through those choices, I've met some amazing people along the way. And I guess two of the people I met is Gary Douglas, who's the founder of Access Consciousness. Met him first. And, I went and listened to him speak at an event. I was just so intrigued by this man. And it was at a Mind, Body and Spirit festival in Sydney, actually. And I was so used to walking around a Mind, Body and Spirit festival and buying everything, looking at everything, trying to find what I felt was missing. Because I was like, there's got to be something else, like that mentality, and trying to find something, And it was the first time I met someone who spoke with this energy of like, basically, you're not screwed up. You're not wrong. And it's like, stop trying to find the wrongness of you and start maybe asking a question of what's right about you. And when I heard him speak, he was irreverent. He swore. He, talked about things that I knew but nobody else had spoken about before. And it was one of the most refreshing things I ever went to. So I walked out of there going, okay, I've got to find out more about this. And so since then, that was, I think, 21 years ago. 21 years ago. Wow. And look how young I look. And 21 years ago. And met Gary, and then me being me, I just went, wow, I have to find out more about this stuff. And throughout that, my whole life has changed from, relationships, business, money. I was hugely in debt. Like a whole lot of things have changed over those years from using the Access tools. And like I said, kept following the energy. Now it's like I travel the world. Probably I used to travel before 2020 about 10 months of the year. And now, I'm going to say 6 or 7 is what pleases me. And I learned to sort of choose what pleases me, because I think if you choose what pleases you, what brings you joy, then it creates your life to be ease. And then you can actually be a contribution to others. So including the planet. So yeah, so that's my little
Fantastic. It's just incredible. I think that curiosity that you've had since an early age, and you just followed that curiosity and explored, and have not just accepted the status quo or what everyone else is doing. You've really found what's resonated with you, and what and that's increased your level of, I guess, access to consciousness, so to speak. Yeah.
Can I say, unfortunately, what I see is not many people have that in their life, like go forth and do that. Like most people would like you to choose something that they can define so that you can make others feel comfortable. And I was lucky enough to have a father he died about 9 years ago, but my whole life he was like, Simone, this is your life. You need to go live it. And he would, because my mother would get so cranky at me for choosing anything, anything basically, let's stop at that, and my father would say, go, you need to choose this. You need to find out if this works for you or not. And my whole entire life, he was like that. So I was really lucky to have someone as a parent who was so encouraging, just go and explore. And he was like, I will be here for you. Basically, when you stumble and fall, I'm here. And I was like, okay, great. So I was really and forever grateful for that.
That's incredible. It's so nice to hear that your father gave you that freedom, and then obviously still provided that safety net. It's I'm always here for you, but go out and discover yourself and find out more about yourself. And that experience where you ran into Gary Douglas at the Mind Body Spirit Festival in Sydney reminds me of that quote that I've read. It's from a Buddha, and it's essentially, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So obviously at that point in your life, when you were seeking and looking and being so curious, that your teacher appeared there in front of you.
Yeah. And I think that happens throughout our whole life, and it shows up in really many different ways. If something's showing up in your life right now, whatever it is, you asked for it. So if you've got this, if you've got this destruction mode in place, you asked for it. If you've got this amazing, magic and luck and greatness, you asked for it. So I think that's a really key piece. It's like, what are you actually asking for? You're allowed to ask, The universe is like, hey, I've got your back. What would you like? And you're like, let me work it out all on my own. I'll do it all myself. You don't have to do it all yourself. What would you like to ask for? I mean, that's a great tool. Even just right now, start, write a list, 5, 10, 20, 100 things. What would you like to ask for? Not from greed, from, hey, I'm the valuable product here. What else is possible?
That reminds me of another quote, is that one that states that the quality of life is determined by the quality of questions you ask yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we'll get into the questions we ask ourselves through the topic today, which is in essence is stress and overwhelm something that we invent, or is it the choice we make? And given we've been through such a period of perceived stress, certainly through this COVID period of constant change and moving parts and shifts in lifestyle, and people, as you mentioned before recording, moving up to the Sunshine Coast and crowding your space.
Yep, everyone's up here. Queensland wouldn't let anyone in. Now they're letting everyone in. Yeah.
So what have you got to share in terms of enlighten the listeners about this topic of stress? Because
Well, let's look at the what has the Captain Obvious in the past few years, and there's always seems to be this commonality that is around, like this commonality of lack, of scarcity, of fear, of that, and then again you could be somewhere and there's a commonality of adventure. And then you're stepping on this road to adventure. So part of the thing that I look at is, what if you started to get clear on what works for you? Because we quite often buy into everybody else's point of view. So the first tool that I would give, which is a question, is asking, who does this belong to? And 99% of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions are not yours. So you come up with this anger, this fear, this lack, this, whatever it is, and ask the question, who does this belong to? Now, you don't need to work it out. It doesn't need to be like, oh, this is Aunt Betty's from whatever, or next door neighbors. But if the energy of it lightens up, then it's generally not yours, because we are way more psychic than we, give ourselves credit for. Like, we're a billion times more psychic than what we acknowledge, and we pick it up. And it's really easy for you to have a look at. If you walk into a room and you've not spoken to anyone, you know the vibe. Like, I could ask you and say, what is it? And you go, oh, everyone's really happy and relaxed. Or, geez, something's gone down here. Like, something went down the last 10 minutes. Like, there's been a fight or something. So you're so willing to acknowledge it in moments like that. Maybe you walk into a family gathering or a party or something. But what if you had that for like at least 100,000 kilometers outside of where your body is? You pick up on this stuff. So that's one of the main tools I would ask is, who does this belong to? And one of the things I did in 2020, I was in Budapest, Hungary, and, came home. I got the last flight into Australia just before they did quarantine in hotels. And although I still had to do that, whole other story. And so I came home and, I had to do quarantine in my house, which I was sort of like, that's okay. I've got a pretty nice house. I've got a gym downstairs. I like it. You like that space. But then all of a sudden I was here and I started to question a lot of my choices in life because I had the space, and I'm going to see the relaxation to do that. And one of the things I looked at was I'd broken up a relationship, I don't know, probably like a year prior to that. And, people project at you, oh, you're going to have another relationship, or you're going to do this. And I was like, I haven't even asked myself what I would like. So I did this Excel spreadsheet because I love a Google Doc, right? And I wrote down these topics. I wrote down relationship, sex, business, money, body, and geographical. And for me, I just went, every day I went on a walk on the beach, and I started to ask myself, what would I like with these topics? Like geographical, where do I actually want to live? Do I want to live here in Queensland? Do I want to live somewhere else in the world? What would I like to create with my body? And quite often, so many people put business and money together. They just lump it together, and it's not necessarily so. What do I want to create with money? What do I want to create with business? Like, what businesses can I, add to my life? And then same thing with relationship and sex. So many people can lump that together, but sex is sex and relationship is relationship. So a whole different topic. So I really started asking myself, if I was creating my reality today, like mine, not my next door neighbors, not my families, not my friends, not what I'm supposed to do. If I was creating my reality today, what would I ask for and what would I choose? And really coming out of any judgment I had of what it was I was asking for. And I got really vulnerable with myself and looked at all of this and went, okay, so let's create this. But not like the secret, like having a wall and manifesting all that sort of stuff. I think people get really a bit confused about manifestation as well, because if you look up the definition of manifestation from a dictionary before 1937, it's how things show up. It's that they show up. So you manifest something, it shows up. But manifestation is taken out of context a lot nowadays, is what I noticed. So anyway, I started to get really clear on this and have a look at what it is that I wanted to create with my life. So, that's one of the tools that you could use in order to see what next.
And what other tips do you have for the listeners around this stress, overwhelm, and how to navigate through it?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing is that, who does it belong to? And then the second one is, have a look, are you really overwhelmed? Because it's so easy for us to go, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, I've got the kids, I've got the business, I've got this, I've got bills, I've got this, really easy for you to, if I said, write a list of all why you're overwhelmed, you go, oh, that's easy. What if none of it was true? Because in truth, you can handle something so different. And I think most of us go to that reason and justification of, I'm overwhelmed and I'm stressed, rather than, okay, what if we actually inserted relaxation? And I think that's something that a lot of us find really, really hard to have a look at is, what is relaxation for you? And I realized at one point, I didn't really know what relaxation is. Like, I run at 1,000,000 miles an hour and do all of that, and I'm really super busy, etc. And then, so what I did was, as I walked on the beach, I started asking myself, what is relaxation for me? And I ran like an access consciousness process and did that. And then what I realized was time came out of the equation. I stopped looking at the time because you know how we do that thing of going, oh, I'm going to be late, or I'm time, or I slept in. Slept in from what? So you slept till 8 o'clock. Why are you judging that? Time became, not relevant. And I noticed as time became not relevant, judgment ceased to exist from my world. And I was like, oh, if we stop judging ourselves and judging everything that we choose, and time is not relevant, like time is a creation, then there's a level of relaxation we can be. And then you start to look at what you've decided you're overwhelmed with and stressed with and go, okay, is any of this relevant? Like, how important is this that I get this done today, or that I ring this person, or I go to this party, or I, do this project, etc. What part of it is actually a contribution to my life and living and matches the energy of what it is that I'm asking for? Yeah, so again, fantastic. I think you need to get to really that space of vulnerability and being vulnerable with yourself of what it is that you truly like to create as your life and living.
And you raised a really good point there, that pause and reflection and really question what you're doing. Because you see people that are just constantly busy doing and not really questioning what they're doing and whether it's serving them, or, as you said, is it someone else's stress that you've taken on and you just feel overwhelmed because you've taken on all these other stresses, and is that your choice, or you just feel that you're just doing it to please them, and it still might not be pleasing them, and so I really like that, how you said you stop, you think, you start asking questions and quality questions, and then yeah.
Well, you actually touched on something that I'd like to reiterate in slightly different ways when you try and please people. So 2 questions I would ask as well is, one is, who do you think of before you choose? Because how many of you don't put you in the equation? Especially if you're in a relationship and you have a family, it's like, oh, the kids, the partner, or the business, etc., all of it. And it's like, well, none of that can actually be this joyful, amazing time if you're not actually putting you in the equation, like you're not in the computation. So who do you think of before you choose? And most people would rather like have this proof of doing. So it's like, oh, look, I do, like that do world, rather than what can I be today? And I mean, if you're in business, one of the first questions I ask is, where is my energy required? Because I'm in Australia, I wake up and we work worldwide. Europe is still awake, America's awake. So there's definitely got that energy of like, are you awake? Are you awake? Are you awake? Sort of thing. So I could let that run my life, or I could ask the question, where is my energy required today? And you get that ping and you're like, oh, there, I've got to call that person, or this project, or this business, etc. So same thing as your family. Where is my energy required? And you might, I don't know, one of your kids, it's just like, oh, I'll go check on them, or etc. So if you're more in question, then you expand your awareness. And from expanding your awareness, you can be more in relaxation. And most people would rather choose something so that they can be like others or be liked by others. And what if you gave that up? Like, what if you were no longer trying to prove something? What if you just enjoyed who you be?
And that stopping and thinking is allowing that increased level of consciousness, because you're not just constantly just running and doing, you're actually pausing and asking questions, and the answers are starting to flow. And I was reading prior to obviously the interview, was that this whole thing of asking a question is not necessarily a right or wrong answer. It actually opens up a multiple choice, and so there's more freedom in that. And then I listened to Dr. Dane's words around chaos, and I think maybe you want to share something about that, is because he was certainly talking about that, embracing chaos, and we live in too much order and in these boxes, and by embracing chaos, we get more options, more choices.
We do. Yeah, most people have gone to the judgment of chaos and gone, no, that's havoc, right? You don't want to create havoc. Like, that's just like, wah, but instilling chaos. Like, I was just talking to someone before I came on here, and to do with the business of access and something. And she was like, oh, what if we do this, this, and this? And I said, no, what if we instill chaos? And because at the moment, the way she had stipulated we do everything was a level of control that does not allow anything else to show up. And I was like, but you're controlling what people get to do. What if you instill chaos and go, hey guys, here you go. We've got this available for you. Get them to reach for it. Then they'll choose it. Because most of us don't like to have that order. Like, you don't like to be told what to do. You like to, you like to choose. Even though we hardly ever give ourselves, really infinite choice. It's like, but you do like to choose. You don't like to have something as a necessity that you must do. So you want to choose. So if you instill chaos in everything, like I quite often use the tool of instilling chaos into my money flows, instilling chaos into my business. Like, I'm hanging out with a friend this weekend and we were talking about, should we book a restaurant or do this? And we went, let's just go with the flow. Like, let's just literally, because, you book a restaurant and then that time comes and you go, I've got to go to the restaurant because we booked it. Why? You instill chaos and you go, no, I'm really not that hungry right now. Or you're hungry in 3 hours or something, or let's cook, or let's do something, or let's go somewhere different. I do get that sometimes you have to book a restaurant because they might be booked out. I understand that. And where does it not allow you to, as I would say, follow the energy? And it's like, and go, okay, what next? And ask your body. It's like, okay, instill chaos in your body. What next? Like, you notice if you go to work out, like how many people go, I've got to work out for X amount of minutes, or, on here, I've got to run, I've got to do weights, I've got to da-da-da-da. And they have this like regiment of what it is, rather than, I don't know, with my body, sometimes my body's like 10 minutes, we're done. Or other times it's like, no, let's just keep going. Let's go again and again and again, because there's this joy and this movement in your body. So and that's being in constant question. And there's also, and going with your awareness and your knowing. So the one thing I would look at a little differently than stopping and thinking, because thinking, we talk about it in Access saying, thinking you're stinking. Because when you stop and start to think about stuff, you sort of start to go, that pros and cons thing, the judgment, is that really, you start to question it, not in an expansive question, more as in an answer question. So, because what we talk about is like the higher harmonics is knowing, right? And the lower harmonics of that is thinking. So you know. Like I was talking yesterday about when I was in Budapest in Hungary, I knew I had to get out of there. It was so weird. My body, every time I was doing a class there, I was like, I want to go home. And I, of course, started to go, am I being lazy? Do I not want to facilitate anymore? Do I not want to do this? But my body was like going, we've got to get the hell out of here, and it knew. It knew. And you'll so often acknowledge your knowing when someone calls and I knew you were going to call. So you'll acknowledge that, but why not acknowledge the bigger things? What do you know? So I would ask myself, what do I know about this that I haven't been willing to acknowledge that I know? That if I did acknowledge that I knew, would create my life to be way easier and way more fun.
And that's, I guess that comes back to that self-doubt that people might have, and, questioning that they don't know. So what would you say to those that are in that sort of self-doubt to say, well, if I'm supposed to know, how do I know if I'm doubting myself?
So do something too, like pick a topic that you think you know nothing about. Like, because... and go, okay, so carpentry, I don't know, I just named that. And it's like, what do I know about it, right? Because we pick up things so much and then we think, if we didn't go and study it, if we didn't do this, we don't know about it, whatever. And it's like, you do know. Like, there's usually something in your life that you found really easy. Like you mentioned Dane here before, right? Dane he takes incredible photos, right? Incredible photos. And for years, this was years ago, he was taking all these photos. Like, we were in Sydney and there was this lightning storm and he takes this photo just as this lightning is coming into this building. It was wild, right? And then these photos of like birds in flight and the way their wings are, or a lizard. And I swear to God, this lizard's looking at him and the way he captures it. And then you know what he decided he had to do? A photography course. Yeah. And everyone went, what are you doing? You know when to hit the shutter, But we've all been there, done that. We go, we're good at something. We have this capacity. And then we go, I better go study it. Why? You already know it, And so have a look at that and just sit back and relax and go, what do I know about this? Like, it could be animals. You might be the person who knows how to walk over to a horse that has never been patted before or something, or how to be with dogs or cats or anything. What do you know? Cooking is another thing. How many people, find cooking their worst nightmare? And then others are just like, look in the fridge and then make something amazing. And you're like, how the hell did you do that? It's like, they know how things work together, or someone who likes surfing, they go out into the ocean and, you read the waves, you're working with the ocean, with the planet, with all of that. So start to look, and most of the time what you're great at, you just dismiss. I see that all the time. And it's like people go, oh, anyone can do that. No, they can't. What you are great at is usually what you have described as absolutely useless. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what if it was time for you not to be useless? Like, start acknowledging the capacities you have and use that tool. Like if you have that, like you say, doubt, that self-doubt, use that tool right at the beginning that I gave of who does this belong to, and ask, is this mine? Because how many people are doing that? Like, as an example, many years ago when I was a kid, we used to go up to Tamworth, and our cousins had this property and they had horses and lots of animals. And I used to go riding horses, every weekend, and loved it. And then years later, I didn't ride horses for a long time. And then years later, I was talking about riding, and I had this huge accident in Costa Rica. And I realized I had developed what I would say a fear of horse riding. But I was like, this is weird. Like, I was riding and then all of a sudden I was fearful. And I was talking to my mother and she said, oh my God, I remember you riding when you were younger and had really long hair. And she said, you just jump on the back of the horses and go screaming across the paddocks with your hair out there. And, and I was like, oh my God, she's going to die like this. And I went, as she's telling the story, I went, oh, this is not my fear. This is yours. It's my mother's fear that I started to buy as mine. And we do that all the time. Like, especially as parents, like parents go, don't do that, you'll get hurt. And the kid's going, why am I going to get hurt? And it's like, what if you empowered your kids? If you touch that, it's hot, you might burn yourself. But hey, if you want to, go ahead, And so how much of that fear is not even yours? How much of that doubt is not even yours? Again, we're so much more psychic. You pick it up from everybody around you.
And I was just thinking, whilst you're sharing, that I might have opened the can with the listeners, and I'm just thinking, if I put myself in their shoes, they're probably thinking, you've just mentioned chaos in this sort of how do we better manage stress, or I look at stress in a better perspective, and I've just thrown this thing of chaos in there, and I'm thinking, if they're stressed and then think chaotic and embrace chaos, I'm thinking, is that going to serve them? And I was just wondering, what have you got to say in that sort of situation?
Yeah, look, I think you need to destroy and uncreate what your definition is of chaos as well, because I think that's where people, when they misidentify it and then they go, chaos is like, oh, I'm going to be singing and dancing on tables and I'm not going to do anything and blah blah blah. It's like, no, what if the moment that you go to doubt, the moment you go to stress, the moment you go to overwhelm, what I'd like you to do is just stop for a second. Even if you have to take yourself to the bathroom and people think you have diarrhea, I don't care what it is, but take yourself off somewhere. If you can, I highly suggest, like, even if you've got a plant or a tree, or take your shoes off and put it on the grass, something, and make that contact with the earth, or even with your body, like even put your hand on your body somewhere and just be like, hey, and it's like, okay, so first of all, is this stress? Like, is this overwhelm? Is this doubt mine? Okay. You might try and make it yours and you'll come up with all these reasons and justifications. But if you just play with that energy of going, okay, if it wasn't mine, then what would I choose? Like, what would I like to choose as my reality? And instilling chaos might be, you know what, I had 20 things on the list that I had decided I had to do today. And if I didn't do them, I was going to make myself wrong at the end of the day. What if instilling chaos is, I might do one of those things and I'm going to make the demand that I don't judge myself. And you might end up doing 40 things. You know what I mean? It's like, but instilling chaos makes it a choice, not a necessity. That necessity and that order is, I must tick every box. I must do this. And you set yourself up for judgment. What if instilling chaos is you no longer judge yourself ever again? Like, from this moment. I remember Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, when he said, there was a day that he realized that judgment never created anything greater. Judging himself or anyone else never created anything greater. And from that moment, he made the demand that he would never judge again. I was like, God, that's so cool. And trust me, I've really attempted to do that, and you still end up judging yourself, every now and then, but I'm 90% better than what I was. I mean, if you give an example, if you're going, if you decide that you've got a fat butt, right? And it's like, and then you judge it and judge it and judge it. You don't wake up in the morning and then all of a sudden your butt is small. It's like your body doesn't change based on judgment. Your body changes based on request and based on question and being an allowance of it. And then it will change. Same as everything else. Same as your money flows. Like if you're judging your money flows, it doesn't change because you judged money flows. It'll change if you start being grateful for it. Allow something different to show up. That's instilling chaos.
Yeah, it's just the thought that came to my head was, that you're talking about that perfectionism. I need to achieve these 20 tasks. If I don't, then I failed the day. I completely failed the day. And that's that real perfectionist mentality. And I'm thinking that perfection is all around pursuit of order, and I think what I've picked up is if you let go of that perfectionism, embrace the disorder, the chaos.
Yeah.
And then that puts you in a more flow state and enables that time to, basically time to go away. You become timeless, you become in this zone and you actually become more productive. Have I got a good interpretation?
Yep, absolutely.
Or
Yeah. I mean, you allow yourself to stop and smell the roses. And the roses might be that you stop and, I don't know, you randomly smile at someone and maybe you engage and have a conversation. But how many of us walk around the planet just so, in our own judgmental state of trying to fit in, of trying to do the right thing, this proof of doing that I was mentioning before, rather than just be like, hi planet, hi world, hi people, hi animals, hi body, and be more like that, be more playful, be like a kid. You know how kids meet each other? You see 2 4-year-olds and they're like, hi, what's your name? What do you do? Where'd you grow up? What do you do? How much money do you earn? They're just like, hi, want to play? And it's like, what if that was more our reality?
Absolutely. You get more present, don't you?
Yeah.
By, embracing as opposed to worrying about where I need to be. And I was thinking of that, that typical mother that thinks that, has a perception of how they should be as a mother, and that may have been, their mother's projection onto them. And if they're not doing certain things, then they're a failure. And so I'm thinking of that moment of walking home, with your kid, and the kid's sort of wanting to embrace the roses and muck around with them, and the mothers go, oh, no, come on, we've got to get home, we've got to get dinner on, got to get dinner on. Whereas what you're sharing is essentially just embrace that moment, go with it, and don't worry if dinner's 5-10 minutes later. You are actually experiencing life by allowing this disorder or chaos, or inviting in chaos.
Well, what if you had cereal for dinner? There's chaos for you. Or, I used to say to my ex, because he had a son, so I had a stepson. I used to go, how many nights can we give him pizza before it's considered abuse? I was like, I don't want to cook dinner every night, It's like, but it's funny. It's like, yeah. Let's give up that control and come back to being really present with ourselves and our bodies and the planet. The planet's asking for it. It really is. It's like, hey, will you please start receiving from me?
Yeah, no, just really like you to share, because you mentioned a couple of times whilst we've been chatting about access consciousness, and the listeners are probably intrigued as to what exactly is it. Can you please share what is access consciousness?
It was funny. Someone said to me the other day, what's your elevator pitch about access? And I went, depends who's in the elevator. It's like, but it does. But essentially access consciousness is, the tagline of access is empowering you to know that you know, which for me, like I said, when I met Gary, was one of the most refreshing things. He wasn't telling me, if you don't do this, you're wrong. It was the first time that I went, wow, maybe I'm not as screwed up as I think I am. Maybe I've actually done some stuff that's right. So it's empowering you to know that you know. It's a whole lot of tools and processes, including body work. We have a lot of body work, a lot of different classes I guess, tools and processes to change any area of your life that you think is not working for you. because a lot of people think they have a problem with something. They think they have a money problem or business or relationship or parenting and that, but you usually create what you think you have a problem with, and you can change anything. You really can.
So it's essentially liberating someone's from their disempowerment from being stuck in this ordered state that's been projected on them as to what they should be doing.
Yeah. What if you didn't function from projections and expectations of anyone, including yourself? Like, how many projections and expectations do you have of yourself? What if you only asked every day, all right, what would it take for me to be happy today? And most people go to, oh, that means I'm not going to do X, Y, Z. No, I love business. Like, that was one of the first books I wrote, Joy of Business. And it's like, I love it. And it's like, there's so many things that I love. So me being happy is choosing business. Me being happy is choosing, X, Y, Z. So what if you actually ask for a life of ease and a life of happy? Can include so much more than you think. Play with the energy of it.
Absolutely. I love those words. And Simone, how can the listeners best connect with you and find out more about Access Consciousness and the great work you do around that?
Well, you can go to accessconsciousness.com. You can also go to SimoneMilasas.com. And I have a good name because so far I've never discovered another Simone Milasas. So if you Google Simone Milasas, that's my website, my Instagram handle, Facebook, all of that and more. Makes it nice and easy.
Fantastic. And for the listeners, I'll include those handles and links in the show notes. And thank you so much, Simone, for empowering the listeners with your knowledge around how to increase and access that level of consciousness and live a life of freedom and joy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Anthony, for having me on here.
Oh, you're welcome. And to the listeners, thank you for tuning in to another insightful episode of Me and My Health Up. Please share it with others that could really benefit from hearing Simone's words of wisdom. I'd love you to get it out there, share it with others, because it could really make their day. And thanks for tuning in to another insightful episode. Thank you.
Bye.